I ain't getting the flu shot at Walmart. Dadgum, normally I gotta get vaccinated before I go in there.
Larry the Cable Guy was one of the biggest redneck celebrities of the 2000s, but he seems to have disappeared in the past few years, and the truth about what happened to Larry is shocking. From why his show got canceled to his relationship with his wife, you guys are not ready for this one. Larry was once a huge part of the Blue Collar Comedy Tour gang. He toured the world with fellow comedians Jeff Foxworthy, Ron White, and Bill Engvall. But Larry wasn't just the third wheel at stand-up gigs. He also starred in movies like Witless Protection and Larry the Cable Guy, Health Inspector. In addition, Larry has released an astonishing number of comedy albums. His 10 albums include The Right to Bear Arms, which was certified platinum. And when Larry got honored with his own Comedy Central roast in 2009, everyone figured that he would be around forever. But fast forward to now, it's almost like Larry is nowhere to be seen. So, what happened to him? Well, Larry's real name is Dan Whitney, and when Dan transformed into Larry, some crazy stuff ended up happening that you won't believe. In 2012, the History Channel gave Larry a reality TV show. It was called Only in America with Larry the Cable Guy. Larry traveled around the country doing silly redneck things that his fan base craved. He worked behind the scenes at a circus, he rode around with a real biker gang, he even went digging for gold once. Larry was going everywhere and his show was a huge hit on television. Then something happened that shocked millions of television viewers. His show got canceled after just 3 seasons. Dan would later explain the 2 reasons why he gave up a super popular reality show like Larry. And you won't believe the first disgusting reason that made Dan quit. He was told that Larry would be attending a music festival in Pennsylvania for an episode of the show. If that doesn't sound too bad, it gets way worse. Dan would be posing as Larry at the music festival and would be there to clean the portable toilets. Dan later told a reporter the nasty details. He admitted in an interview, "I didn't want to do that. I mean, that was one of the nastiest things on the planet." When you hear that excuse, you might think that Larry didn't need another reason to quit the show, but he still had a very valid reason for leaving reality TV. Larry the Cable Guy had become really popular, and Dan finally realized that it was negatively affecting his personal life. Not only was Larry touring with his blue-collar comedian friends, but when the reality show filming got added to his hectic work schedule, Dan often found himself away from home for up to 6 nights every week. That's crazy enough too. But when you find out how Dan really feels about his superstar success, you won't believe it either. Dan started doing stand-up comedy in the early 1990s. He only had one goal in mind. According to Dan, all he wanted was to enjoy doing comedy and make enough to pay the bills. Before Larry walked away from mostly everything, he was pitching products, starring in movies, filming a reality show, and selling out stadiums doing comedy tours. Celebrity network websites calculated Larry's net worth to be a shocking $100 million. Sources claim that he racked up $20 million a year just by being a product spokesman. One time in particular, Larry got paid to endorse a pharmaceutical product named Prilosec. He reportedly earned tens of millions of dollars. Dan bought a multi-million-dollar estate in Scottsdale, Arizona, and there's also his main home, a ranch in Lincoln, Nebraska. But while Dan has earned a cushy life by performing as Larry, he's also confessed some shocking things about Hollywood. Dan has revealed that he created Larry to be a country kid that appealed to his target demographic. But in the entertainment industry, Larry has been attacked by some members of the media, and Dan says that Larry got stereotyped as a racist redneck. Apparently, Dan is convinced that left-wing Hollywood detests him, so Larry has always felt like an outsider in Hollywood. Dan also confessed that he had a crazy relationship with another celebrity he called a Hollywood outsider. Apparently, Dan is buddies with Tyler Perry, who's famous for his Medea movies. Dan admires how Tyler built his media empire from the ground up. He says that Tyler knew that Hollywood would reject Medea if it were up to them. In his real life, Dan is married to Kara Whitney. Kara grew up in Wisconsin on a cattle ranch. When Larry started touring with the blue-collar comedians, he did a show in Las Vegas. Kara was working in Vegas as a DJ. They met in Sin City and instantly hit it off. After a few years of dating and juggling Larry's crazy work schedule, the two of them got engaged. They got married in Nebraska in July 2005, where Dan grew up, and they both called it their dream wedding. That's shocking because the wedding was far from fancy or normal, let alone a dream. Dan and Kara didn't exchange vows in a church in Nebraska. They got married in a field. Dan wore a cut-off sweatshirt, and if you're picturing Kara in a flowing white dress, you won't believe this. Kara wore a camo tank top and shorts as the bride. And after the I do's, at least there was a wedding reception, if you can call it that. Dan and Kara served reheated lasagna to their wedding guests. The most elaborate thing they did for their wedding was setting off fireworks. To Dan and Kara, it was perfect, and it only cost them $180 to pull off. Dan has always praised and supported his wife. He's posted pics on social media with captions poking fun at himself. Dan likes to joke about how he married a beautiful woman who's out of his league. Kara is also a religious person, and she's published faith-based books and gone on book tours. Dan also loves to acknowledge Kara's success on social media. They have 2 kids named Wyatt and Reagan, and Dan is apparently a hands-on dad now that he's home more. Their 180-acre farm in Lincoln, Nebraska has a dozen horses and lots of dogs and cats. But while life at home has been mostly good for Dan, there have been some challenges too. Dan and Kara's son Wyatt was born with a painful handicap called hip dysplasia. While Wyatt was eventually cured, there were plenty of medical bills. Not only did Dan pay the bills like he'd hoped to when he started doing comedy in the 90s, he also used his Larry the Cable Guy millions to benefit others in need. Dan and Kara have donated outdoor artwork to his hometown of Pawnee City, Nebraska. He donated money to his old high school for improvements like new curtains and a soundboard for the gymnasium. Dan and Kara also gave significant donations to the International Hip Dysplasia Institute. And in September 2010, they donated $5 million to a children's hospital financed by the late golfer Arnold Palmer. Dan and Kara also founded the Get Redone Foundation to assist veterinarians and their children. In November 2020, Dan reappeared as Larry for a Netflix comedy special. When he performs as Larry now, Dan talks about how Kara put him on a diet. Larry says that his wife lets him have one diet cheat day, or as Larry jokes, a cheat day is anytime I drive by a fast food restaurant when she's not with me in the car. In this comedy special, Larry also made cracks you won't believe about his mother-in-law. The mother-in-law won a hot dog eating contest when she devoured 40 wieners in 10 minutes. Larry also joked about his wife's favorite show in Las Vegas. According to Larry, Kara loves the male dance review Chippendales. Larry joked, "You know why she likes going to the Chippendales? She didn't marry very good, she married a Chunkendale." But when he's not being Larry, people cannot believe one shocking thing about Dan. Dan didn't grow up sounding like Larry in real life, and he's admitted something crazy in interviews. While Larry speaks with a southern accent, Dan confesses that it's all an act. Dan says that people get so shocked when they hear his voice in his Midwestern accent, and some people still can't believe that Larry isn't real. While Larry might just be a character, it looks like he hasn't completely disappeared after all. That should make Larry's target demographic happy, and Dan sounds happier too, now that his work-life balance is a little better. Anyway, what do you guys think? What do you think about Larry the Cable Guy? Are you a fan of the character? Have you heard Dan speak as himself? Let me know in the comments below.